My sister got a dream vacation for her birthday. I got a card with an invoice inside. You owe us for everything, Dad said. I walked out. Now they're desperate, saying, you misunderstood. So, this all started about a month ago, on my sister Clara's 25th birthday. I'm 27, and we've always had a complicated relationship, but it got worse in the last few years. Anyway, I wasn't expecting anything extravagant, but the way my family handled the whole thing threw me off completely. Let me give you some context first. Growing up, Clara was the golden child. I know, I know, everyone has one in their family, but I think mine took the whole thing to the next level. Clara never did anything wrong. She was smart, athletic, and pretty much perfect. I mean, she made straight A's, got into a prestigious university, and now has a well-paying job at a tech company. As for me, I've always been more of a quiet, introverted person. I didn't fit into the picture-perfect mold. I went to a local college, worked part-time at a cafe, and struggled to find a career path that clicked with me. I'm happy, but it's like I've always been compared to Clara, and it stings a little. So, back to her birthday. My parents, Dad in particular, had been planning this big surprise for months. Clara's dream was always to go to Hawaii. She talked about it constantly, and I guess my parents decided to make it happen. They booked this all-inclusive trip for her, complete with a fancy resort, excursions, the works. I knew it would be a big deal because my parents are all about showing off their success, especially when it involves Clara. Now my gift. I didn't expect anything extravagant. A small gesture would have been enough, but I didn't think they would completely ignore me in the process. My parents didn't even acknowledge my birthday a month earlier, and I let it slide. But Clara? She gets an all-expenses-paid vacation. Anyway, on her birthday, they handed her the biggest envelope I'd ever seen. My dad had this smug grin on his face while Clara ripped it open. Her eyes lit up, and she started jumping up and down when she saw the details of the trip. It was honestly kind of cute, but at the same time, I felt this gut punch of unfairness. After the birthday party ended, my parents called me into the living room. I wasn't really expecting anything, but figured I should at least acknowledge their gift to Clara. They handed me a card, just a regular one, but when I opened it, my stomach dropped. Inside was an invoice. I swear I thought I was going to pass out. The invoice was for everything my parents had given me over the years. School supplies, birthday gifts, food, clothes, basically, everything they'd ever spent on me, calculated and itemized. The total came out to nearly $50,000. I looked at Dad, and he just sat there, waiting for me to react. You owe us for everything, he said, his voice completely calm. You've taken so much without ever giving back. At that moment, I felt like the world had shifted. I wanted to laugh because it was just so ridiculous, but it also hurt. The way he said it, so casual, like I was just some kind of debt, was like a punch to the gut. My mom was sitting beside him, but she didn't say anything. She just nodded like this was completely normal. Clara was in the other room, still celebrating her vacation, completely oblivious to what was going on. I couldn't process it all at once. What is this? I finally managed to ask, feeling the heat rising in my face. Are you serious right now? Dad nodded. We've been more than generous, and we're tired of supporting you without any return. We expect this to be paid back. He paused, then added, you should consider this a wake-up call. I felt like I was going to burst. The sheer nerve of him, of both of them, really. But I couldn't stay. I grabbed the card and tossed it on the table. I'm not doing this, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm not paying you back for your generosity. You've never been supportive, and now you're demanding money for your supposed love. I stood up, ready to walk out, but Dad called after me. Don't walk away from this, Mia. This is your responsibility now. I didn't care. I walked out, slamming the door behind me. I drove to a friend's place and just sat there, trying to process what had just happened. It was unreal. I've never felt so alone in my entire life. The next few days were a blur of texts and calls from my parents, but I refused to answer. I was still furious. But then things started getting weird. Clara called me, practically in tears, telling me that I misunderstood the whole situation. She said Dad had been upset about the birthday and that I was overreacting. She kept insisting they didn't want money from me, that it was all a joke. But I didn't buy it. Why would they give me an invoice like that if it wasn't serious? And then Dad started calling, leaving voicemails. He was apologizing, saying I was being overly sensitive. He told me I needed to come to terms with reality and that family is important. But it felt so fake. He didn't even sound remorseful, just like he was trying to manipulate me into thinking I was the one in the wrong. They were desperate to fix things, but I wasn't sure how to handle it. I needed time to think. The days after I walked out of their house felt like a haze. I stayed at my friend Lila's place for a few days. She'd been one of the few people who understood the frustration I'd been feeling for years. She listened to me vent about my parents, about how I'd always been treated as the second priority, always overlooked, always pushed aside for Clara. Lila was the kind of friend who didn't try to fix things, but just let me talk. And for once, I didn't feel like I was crazy for being upset. I didn't hear from my parents for a few days after that initial burst of calls and messages, but the silence didn't last long. It started with my mom. She left me a voicemail one evening, sounding more pitiful than I've ever heard her. "Mia," she began, her voice cracking a little, "please come home. Your father didn't mean it. You've misunderstood. It's just that we're worried about you. You know, you've always been so independent, but we wanted to see you do better. We're not trying to make you feel like you owe us. Honey, you're our daughter. Please come talk to us." I couldn't help but roll my eyes when I heard her voice. Misunderstood? Really? They both knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't some innocent mistake or a joke gone wrong. No, this was them trying to guilt-trip me into doing what they wanted, trying to manipulate me into feeling responsible for everything they'd spent on me. The next day, I got a text from Clara. She was acting like nothing had happened, like everything was normal, but it was clear she was trying to smooth things over. "Hey, I know things have been rough lately, but please don't be mad. You've got to understand that Mom and Dad only want the best for you. They're just stressed, and I think they might have gone a little too far with that invoice thing. I'm sure it wasn't meant to be taken seriously. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. Clara was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in their eyes. But now, she was caught up in their drama, too. I didn't want to argue with her, but at the same time, I felt like I had been living in her shadow my whole life. I couldn't help but resent the way she always got a pass for everything, even this. I didn't respond to her message immediately. I needed time. But later that day, my dad called again, and this time, I answered. I probably shouldn't have, but I was curious to see how far he would go with this. "Mia," he said, his voice more controlled this time, not the angry tone from before. "We need to talk. I know you're upset, but you've got to understand, this isn't about the money. This is about you growing up. You can't keep expecting things from us. We've given you everything, and we need to know that you can take responsibility for yourself. If you don't take this seriously, things will only get worse." The way he spoke, like I was some kind of burden that he had given so much to, it made me sick. I couldn't believe how entitled he sounded. He was supposed to be my father, but all he saw me as was an obligation, something to be paid back for everything he'd done, not out of love, but out of some warped sense of ownership. "Is this really how you want me to feel?" I said, my voice trembling with frustration. "You want me to pay for your generosity? You want me to feel like a debt instead of a daughter? That's what this is about." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could tell he was choosing his words carefully. When he finally spoke, his voice was even colder. "You're being dramatic. This isn't about the past. This is about your future. You need to start taking responsibility, Mia." "Responsibility?" I spat. "By paying you back for everything you've done? For things I never even asked for? I don't need your approval. I never did." There was another long pause. Finally, he sighed. "We can't keep doing this, Mia. If you don't start taking things seriously, you'll regret it." And don't think we won't stop caring about you just because you don't agree with us. That was the moment I knew things were never going to be the same. This wasn't a family anymore. This was a business transaction to them. It wasn't about love or support, it was about power. And they were using guilt as a weapon to keep me under their control. After that call, I couldn't bring myself to go back. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about how they had twisted everything, how they always made me feel like I was never enough. It was about how they expected me to bend over backward for their approval, how they thought they could buy my love and respect. But even then, they didn't stop. Clara called again the next day, sounding even more desperate this time. Mia, you have to understand. It's not like Dad's trying to be a jerk, okay? He's just really stressed with work, and he doesn't know how to handle it. Please don't shut us out. We're family. Family. The word that used to mean something. Now, it just felt hollow coming from her. I couldn't help but feel like Clara was just parroting their lines, trying to get me to come back into the fold, to be the perfect little daughter who would always do what they wanted. I had to make a decision. I couldn't go back to being the daughter who just took what they gave, who kept quiet while they manipulated me. But at the same time, I wasn't sure how far I could go. I needed a way out, but I wasn't sure how to get there without losing everything. That's when I started to think about what I could do. What if I could turn this around? What if I could make them see just how wrong they were? But I knew it wouldn't be easy. They weren't just going to let go of their hold on me that easily. The next few days felt like I was stuck in a limbo, trapped between trying to hold on to my dignity and dealing with the growing pressure from my family. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was confused, exhausted, and honestly, kind of scared. It's one thing to deal with your parents being controlling, but it's another thing entirely when they start treating you like a financial transaction, a liability that needs to be paid off. And what hurt the most was that Clara, my own sister, was caught up in all of this. After Dad's last call, I decided I needed some space. I stayed with Lila for another week, just trying to get my head straight. Every time I thought about going back, I felt a knot in my stomach. But that's the thing about family, you can't just walk away, not without feeling like you've let them down. And for a while, that's exactly how I felt. But then, something started to change inside me. I realized that the way they treated me wasn't my fault. I'd spent so many years bending over backward, trying to meet their impossible standards, trying to earn their approval, and it had never been enough. Why should I keep trying to win a race I'd never be allowed to finish? It wasn't long before I got another message from Clara. This time, it wasn't a text or a call. She showed up at Lila's place, standing on the doorstep with that same apologetic look she always had when she was trying to fix things. I wasn't expecting her to come over, but there she was, holding a cup of coffee like it would somehow make everything better. Mia, she started, stepping inside when Lila let her in. Can we talk? I know you're upset, but Dad didn't mean it like you think. Please don't shut us out like this. I sighed, the frustration bubbling up again. Clara had always been the peacekeeper, the one who could smooth things over with a smile or a few well-chosen words. But this time, it felt different. There was no fixing it. Clara, how many times do I have to tell you? I don't think you get it. It's not just about the invoice or the trip. It's everything. I've been trying to make things right my whole life, but nothing is ever enough. I'm tired of it. Clara shifted uncomfortably, running her hand through her hair. I get that you're angry, but we've always tried to help you. You know we've always been there for you. You can't just turn your back on us over one mistake. One mistake. The phrase stung like a slap in the face. It wasn't just one mistake. It was a lifetime of mistakes. A lifetime of making me feel like I was never good enough, never worthy of the same love and support Clara always got. Clara, this isn't one mistake, I said, my voice trembling with the weight of everything I was holding back. You've always been their perfect little girl, and I've just been the afterthought. Do you really not see it? Every time something went wrong, they expected me to fix it or just disappear. And now, they're treating me like I owe them money, like I owe them for every minute of my life. Can you really not see that? Clara opened her mouth like she was going to say something, but she paused. I could see the conflict in her eyes, like she didn't know what to say anymore. Maybe she did see it. Maybe she just didn't want to admit it. I could feel the shift in the air, the awkwardness growing between us as the silence stretched on. Finally, she spoke again, softer this time. I'm sorry, Mia. I know things haven't been perfect, but please, don't let this tear us apart. We're family. I shook my head, pushing past the wave of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. No, Clara, this isn't about being family. This is about power and control. About them trying to force me into a mold that's never going to fit. I don't need their love if it comes with strings attached. I stood up, pacing around the room, feeling like I was going to burst. They never gave me anything without making me feel like I owed them. And now? Now, they want to make it official. They want to make me pay. I'm not doing it, Clara. I can't. Clara's face fell, and I could see that the guilt was starting to settle in. She looked so torn, like she didn't know whether to stand by me or go back to our parents and play the part they always expected her to play. Mia, please don't leave this like it is. You're my sister. You're my family. And I don't want to lose you over this, she said, her voice pleading. I stopped in my tracks, taking a deep breath. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about her too. I didn't want to lose Clara, but I couldn't keep letting myself be steamrolled just for the sake of keeping the peace. I needed to do something, something that would finally show my parents that they couldn't treat me like this. I'm not going back, Clara, I said, the words final. I can't keep pretending everything's okay. I've got to do something to make them understand how wrong they are. This isn't about money anymore. It's about respect. And they've never respected me. She stared at me, her eyes full of sadness, but I could see a flicker of understanding in them. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to get it. I'll talk to them, she said quietly. But please, don't do anything rash. Let's figure this out together. I didn't respond immediately. What more could I say? She had her own way of handling things, and honestly, I didn't know if I could trust her to change anything. But at least for now, I knew I wasn't alone in this fight. A few days later, my parents called again, but this time I was ready. I picked up the phone, expecting more of their guilt tripping, more of their attempts to make me feel like I was in the wrong. What I wasn't expecting was for them to try and turn the tables even further. Mia, Dad's voice came through, cold as ever. We're disappointed in you, but we're willing to let this go, if you do the right thing. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the moment where I had to decide whether I would keep walking away or let them back into my life on their terms. Do the right thing? I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. I've been doing the right thing my whole life. Maybe it's time for you to learn that you can't control me anymore. I could feel the weight of their words hanging in the air, but I wasn't about to let them manipulate me anymore. The thing about family is that they think they can get away with anything. They think that because they've known you since birth, they can guilt trip you into doing whatever they want, without consequence. But this was the point where I realized I couldn't play along anymore. I wasn't going to be their emotional punching bag. I wasn't going to let them keep treating me like an afterthought, a nuisance they could push around whenever it suited them. I needed to take control back, and I had a plan. I started by gathering everything I could find, every text, every email, every document that proved how badly they had manipulated me over the years. It wasn't just about the vacation or the invoice. It was about everything they had done, all the subtle ways they had tried to keep me small, to make me feel like I wasn't worth their time unless I was useful to them. They'd always made me feel like I needed to earn their approval, and for years, I'd let them get away with it. But not anymore. I started with the house. My parents had always tried to make me feel guilty about leaving. You'll regret it, they'd said, like they had some kind of control over my future. But they didn't know I'd been making plans of my own. I wasn't just going to disappear from their lives like I had before. I had a plan that would make them understand exactly how it felt to be treated like this. And it was going to hit them right where it hurt. I called a lawyer. It wasn't anything drastic at first. I wasn't looking for revenge in some dramatic, over-the-top way. But I did want them to understand that there were consequences to their actions. I started looking into the legal side of things, the money they'd spent on me over the years, the property they had pushed me to pay for, the investments they'd made with my future in mind but never told me about. I wanted to know exactly where I stood, legally. If they wanted to play the "you owe us" game, I was ready to flip the script. I kept everything to myself for a few weeks, just watching, waiting for the right moment. In the meantime, the phone calls and texts kept coming. My parents were desperate now, their messages increasingly frantic, like they could feel the control slipping out of their hands. Every time my dad called, he'd start with the same thing. "Mia, this isn't about the past. We just want what's best for you. Please stop being so stubborn." But I was done. I could see through every word, every tone they used. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to manipulate me into submission. Then, finally, the perfect opportunity arrived. I hadn't told them yet about the legal advice I'd gotten, or the steps I was taking to protect myself. They still thought they had me where they wanted me, trapped in this cycle of guilt and obligation. But the tables were about to turn. My parents had recently invested a considerable amount in a new project, one that they'd been planning to get off the ground for years. It was their big shot, their retirement plan, as they like to call it. And for the longest time, they'd been telling me that I was going to be a part of it. They had even casually dropped hints about how much they expected me to contribute, how I would eventually benefit from it. But I knew the truth. I knew they hadn't included me in any meaningful way. They hadn't told me the full story, and they hadn't given me the details about how much they'd actually invested or what the risks were. They saw me as an investment, something they could cash in on when the time was right. So, I decided to act. I took the legal documents I had gathered, the ones that laid out the terms of the investments they had made with my future in mind, and I called a financial consultant. I wanted to make sure I understood the full scope of what they'd done, what was mine by right, and what was theirs. Then, I filed a request for an official audit of the business they had kept me out of for years. It was the kind of thing that would make them uncomfortable, something that would force them to explain everything. When the audit request came through, my parents were blindsided. They had no idea what I had been up to. My dad called me immediately after he got the notification. "Mia, what is this?" he demanded, his voice shaking with anger. "You can't just go around demanding audits like that. This is family, not business." I smiled, a small, cold smile. "You're right, Dad. This is family. But that doesn't mean I'm going to keep pretending that everything you've done to me is okay. You spent my whole life making me feel like I owed you something. I'm just making sure everything is transparent now. You wanted me to pay up? Well, now it's your turn to answer some questions." For the first time in my life, I could feel the power shift. I wasn't some passive participant in their scheme anymore. They were the ones who had to explain themselves. My mom called later that day, her voice softer but still filled with a sharp edge. "Mia, you've misunderstood. You don't need to do this. Please, let's sit down and talk. We're not asking for anything unreasonable. We just want what's best for you, for the family." "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach, "if you really wanted what's best for me, you would have treated me like an equal all these years. You wouldn't have made me feel like I was a burden. You wouldn't have kept me in the dark about everything that mattered. I'm not backing down this time. You're going to have to face the consequences of your actions." Her response was silence. And I knew then that they were starting to realize they had underestimated me. They thought I was just going to roll over, that I'd cave when they came with their fake apologies and promises to change. But the thing was, I wasn't the same person I had been a few weeks ago. I was stronger now, and I was going to make sure they knew it. Turns out, my parents had listed me as a silent partner in their investment without ever telling me. Legally, I had partial ownership of the property they used to secure funding, and since they'd used my name and credit history in some parts of the paperwork, they were in violation of multiple agreements. I didn't even have to sue. The audit alone was enough to raise red flags with their lenders. Their retirement plan? On the rocks. Their funding? Frozen. The bank demanded a full investigation. And I? I walked in, with my lawyer beside me, and formally withdrew from all financial association with the business. I also demanded compensation for the unauthorized use of my credit. My lawyer made sure it was airtight. My parents were livid. My dad called me a traitor. My mom cried in the meeting, begging me not to ruin them. But I didn't feel sorry, not anymore. I wasn't doing this to be cruel. I was doing this to protect myself. They were the ones who used me. I was just finally standing up for myself. Clara tried to mediate, but even she couldn't excuse the paper trail. When she saw the full scope of what they'd done, even she admitted quietly that it was wrong. She didn't exactly cut ties with them, but she definitely pulled back. We still talk occasionally, but it's not the same. And maybe that's okay. As for me, I moved into a small apartment with peace and privacy. I'm building my own future now, my own career, my own money, my own rules. No guilt, no strings, no invoices tucked inside birthday cards. I haven't spoken to my parents since the settlement was finalized. They lost the business. The house is up for sale. Last I heard, they were still blaming me to anyone who would listen, but I don't care anymore.